Hey folks, welcome to today's product showcase. I'm Cody Stover. I'm on the marketing team here at Customer IO, and I'm joined today by Brendan Fortune. He's a product manager here who has led the effort to bring our new product, Customer IO Data Pipelines, to the market. So conveniently enough, Brendan and I actually started on the same exact day 4 years ago. And I think over these last 4 years, we've both had very similar conversations with customers and prospects who have asked us, can Customer IO be my marketing automation platform and my CDP? And our answer has been kind of and almost. But I think today we're really excited to emphatically say yes with the release of Customer IO Data Pipelines, our CDP product. And we're going to get more into that today. Folks in the audience, we're really thankful to have you here. Brendan's going to be the star of the show as we jump into our product demo. And we're going to get a first look at how CDP empowers you to unify your data, route it to the right sources and destinations in your tech stack, and ultimately, at the end of the day, kind of create those more personalized customer experiences with your data. So we just did introductions. We're now going to talk a little bit first on why did we add a CDP? And then our next topic, when we get into the product, we're going to talk about unifying your data. So what are those first steps you need to do to get your sources and destinations set up? We'll then jump into how does Customer IO Data Pipelines, our CDP, improve data confidence, so making sure data is accurate in the right places. And then we'll kind of round things out with how CDP pairs with our Journeys tool, which for a lot of folks in the audience, maybe you've known us for our Journeys tool, which is our omnichannel messaging platform. So we'll talk a little bit about how the connection works between those two. All right, Brendan, first off, thanks for joining us today. I think the first question maybe on a lot of folks in the audience's mind is, why did Customer IO add a CDP in addition to our Journeys product? So talk to me a little bit there.
Yeah, it's a good question, and thanks for setting this up. I'm happy to be here. So Customer IO has been in I call it the messaging automation space versus marketing automation, because there's lots of different ways that people are using messaging on the product. We've been in that space for a long time, and while a lot has changed over that time, there's one big thing that never has, and that's that the messaging automation only works when you have the right data. And I like to picture this as like messaging automation as a beautiful valley with a huge mountain blocking it in front of it. That's integration mountain, and only after you climb over it do you get to enjoy the valley on the other side. So over the years, we've tried to make that mountain easier to climb in Journeys directly. We've made it possible to sync data from a database or a warehouse without writing code. We've made it possible to push data from any third-party app that supports webhooks directly into Customer IO. We've added identity resolution capabilities. We've added SDKs. We've even made it easy to get data out of Customer IO, whether to a data warehouse or an analytics tool like Mixpanel or Amplitude. So bit by bit, we realized that we had built out most of the pieces of a traditional CDP already. And when we put that together, it was about 6 months ago. And at that point, we connected another dot, which is, for years, we've heard customers say they couldn't afford their CDP, or they were struggling to afford it. Segment's an established player in the space, a great partner of ours, and they do have a free tier, but a lot of the times we would hear from our customers that over time, as they grew, they weren't able to afford that CDP anymore. And some of our newer customers that are coming in without a CDP out of the gate would also say, wow, then I saw the pricing and it was too much. So when our CTO went and built a CDP prototype in Customer IO and showed us that we could run our own CDP at a really affordable price, we're talking like 20 to 90% less than most established CDPs out there, and do that without sacrificing performance, scale, or reliability, we decided to evolve that prototype into a product and built out a high-performance, high-scale CDP that any of our customers could afford.
Yeah, I think anytime you can reduce the number of tools that you're using or the amount of effort you have to put into integrating new things, that's definitely a big win for lots of teams. So as we set this up, we're going to talk first about how CDP kind of helps you unify your data from different sources, get it to the right destinations. But according to Vendor, the average company in 2023 has 130 different applications in your tech stack. Some of you might be saying that's even more for us. But what this means is, I think most of us, there's no shortage of tools collecting different data. But the real challenge is how you actually organize it, how do you get your visibility into it, and how do you actually send it to the right places so that your teams can do things with it. And I think many times that's easier said than done. So Brendan, as we flip into the product demo and start us off, I'm gonna pop that up here. When we start here, how does customer data pipelines allow you to unify your data, and where do we start in the product?
Yeah, yeah. Let's start at this main screen here. This is a demo workspace I've got set up, and I'll just talk through it briefly. So on one side we have data sources. This is where data is coming in, and I've got a few test sources here. One has the message data that's coming from journeys. One is a kind of a fake mobile app. There's an example of what could be a CRM here, although I haven't passed data through there recently. And then billing, for example, maybe this is Stripe or something else. You could have a ton more on here. This is just for demo purposes, but this is where all the data comes in. And a lot of times what we have found when talking with customers is they've got lots of different places here that they want to kind of mix and match data to in the destination. Like Mixpanel, for example, is a great example for analytics where they want to send some data through from certain sources, but not all. And every time they have to go back to their engineers asking them for help, it's just takes a long time, and it's not very it's not work that an engineer really should have to spend time doing. So these are our sources. They all flow through customer IO data pipelines, which then transforms them into the various shapes that these destinations want to see them. So we've got the journeys workspace here, and then just a couple kind of sample tools, some of which, particularly like HubSpot and Mixpanel, have been very popular in early access already. This can look very overwhelming very quickly. You've got a lot of different things going, and how do you set this whole thing up? Is this a lot of like writing code and such? One cool thing about CDP is it's actually not that hard to get started, and I'll do a demo right here. Let's do a JavaScript source. This is our simplest one to set up. This is great for like website tracking. You get a lot of stuff for free if you just use this JavaScript snippet. So I'm going to say connect, and I'm going to put this on a little demo website that I've got over here. It's a fake website about recording videos for friends and loved ones, various like birthdays and stuff like that. So I want anyone who goes to that page, I want to be able to pull some data on them. So I've named the source here. Now I've got to just copy this snippet that's already set up for me. I got this site set up in Squarespace. So I'm going to go into my Squarespace admin and click over to where I can add code, and I'll just paste it in. Don't make any changes to it. Okay, and that's it. If I go over here and I refresh the page, I won't see anything different as a user, but behind the scenes, JavaScript should run. And if I go back over here, I can test the connection. Sometimes this takes a quick minute to come through. I've been messing with this demo site. Let me go to the actual page that I put it on. There we go. And the data is here. So if I want to take a look, I can go over to this data in tab, and I can see this page view. For my testing, it's already got a user ID baked in from previous tests, but I can see lots of data that I get for free with this JavaScript snippet. I can see the path of the page. I can see the title of the page. I can see the user agent of the person who's looking at it, like what kind of browser they're using. I can see the locale. So lots of stuff that you might want to send to various destinations, like an analytics tool that you get for free here. Now let's work through what it would take to send this data through to, let's say, Mixpanel. So I would go and add a new destination, Mixpanel, and I'd have to choose which source I want to connect to, or multiple sources. Here I'll just say the Got a Friend website, and I'm just going to make up some credentials here that I would pull from the Mixpanel admin settings. I could do this just as a Mixpanel admin. And that's it. So at this point, I have a Mixpanel destination set up, and the data would start flowing through if I refresh. I am going to connect that source, but since this one is not actually connected to a real Mixpanel destination, I'm going to delete this, use one that I had already set up, just to avoid sharing credentials in a recorded setting. And so this is my Mixpanel destination I already have set up, but I don't have this new source connected to it. So let's click there. got a little text. And now this is all set up. So if I refresh, I will see in my source another page view come in. And if I go over to Mixpanel, I'll see a page call that was made out automatically here using the default settings. And if I click over to Mixpanel, I'm going to refresh this event list. Here it is. So that is, yeah, just a little bit about how quick it can be to set this up. I could push it to lots of different places, of course, but Mixpanel is a particularly good one for demoing since it shows up right away. And that's what I got.
Yeah, thanks for demoing through that, Brendan. I think folks in the audience, you can probably let your mind go wild too of what your tech stack has in it and which things you want to piece together. And I think that's going to be the really cool thing is we see that kind of octopus view of the different tools connected, and that's going to be different for every team that uses this based on what you value and where you want to get data. So the next thing, I think one of the pain points I've heard folks bring up is we bought all of these, supposedly powerful tools, but they don't talk well together and the data models don't work great. So our tools really don't speak in a lot of different places. So talk to me about how data pipelines kind of works with transformations. How does it get data from one point in the right format for other tools?
Yeah, I think this is a nuanced point. One thing that I think you can always count on when you're routing or transforming data to different places is there are going to be exceptions. Like you're going to want to tweak certain things from their defaults. And so you need to have some flexibility in order to do that. So in this Mixpanel event, for example, I've got it called, let's see, viewed, record happy birthday, got a friend. So it looks like it's putting the title of the page in there. For a Mixpanel, maybe I don't want it to put the title of the page in the actual event name. That can make it harder to generate certain reports on just page views. Maybe I want to leave that as a property. So if I did want to do that, I could go over to the Actions tab in my Mixpanel destination. And here I can see all the mappings that have been predefined for me. And I can do lots of different things. I could, for example, say, I don't want page views and just turn them off. So any page view calls that come through any source will not go through. But for this demo, we'll go in and actually take a look at some of the mapping that's coming through. And I can see it right here. The name of the action being performed is set to viewed, and then this kind of dynamic variable context.page.title, which is being pulled from the source input. If I don't want that, that's fine. I can just delete it. You can see lots of other things you can map in here if you want to, kind of get in the guts of the system. I can save that, and now I'll refresh again. And we'll wait for the data to come through. There it is. And now the event name is just viewed. If I refresh here, yeah, let me see it's changed to viewed. So it's just one small example, but there are a lot of transformations you can do to make sure that whatever is being passed through to whatever destination, each of our destinations has this flexibility, you can have some control over it.
Brendan, I think most folks probably are wanting to keep in compliance with GDPR, or there's HIPAA rules or other compliance things. And maybe you don't want all of your data in all of your tools, or you want a little more fine control into this data point going to this tool, but not another one. So talk to me about kind of what those fine tuning knobs are and how does Customer kind of handle compliance and suppression?
Yeah, maybe two cases to talk through. One is just the vanilla compliance case, and then the other one, maybe just a less serious case where you might still want to filter out certain types of data. So we have a privacy tab here for GDPR, any sort of compliance where you have to remove data from the system. And it does take a few minutes to go through, so I won't do the full demo, I'll just show what it looks like. Basically, you take the user ID that you've been tracking in the system across all of your sources, and you would click up here and put it in, and then you would suppress it. And that would remove the data from the system and prevent data from any data that would try to come in with that user ID in the future would be dropped across the board. So that's a quick example of that sort of compliance. There's another there are more nuanced cases, like one that we have internally. We use Mixpanel internally, and we don't want to send a bunch of employee data to Mixpanel because a lot of the times our employees are playing around with the product, and we don't want it to make it look like the patterns of behavior are changing based on stuff that's really just a test. So you could again go into the Actions tab of Mixpanel here, and I'll just do one example for like a track call. And in this trigger type right here, I could say that I do not want any. Let's see, we'll do. Don't want anything that contains, actually I'll do out a friend here since that's the demo environment. Okay, and so, oops, sorry, this should be does not contain. So what this will do is say, all right, we'll only fire this action if the type coming into the source is a track and the event does not equal that, and then the email address passed in does not contain this value. And you could use this for lots of different filtering cases. And now if I send any data through that doesn't match that, it will just fail out and will not pass the data through.
In the event. But Brendan, one I wanted to call out, Taylor asks, are you able to reconcile existing data across systems? For example, Mixpanel has distinct ID that I want to link all existing events to the users. And Customer.io has customer ID. So basically just different nomenclature for ID. And other systems obviously have other ways of identifying. So are those things all able to be reconciled in CDP?
Yeah, so the way we do that is all of the data that comes in from the source uses a standard schema. So if we look at the JavaScript, for example, there's this user ID value that comes in. And this is true across all sources into Customer.io's data pipelines. So user ID, however, might map to different things. Like Taylor, it sounds like you're calling out. So in Mixpanel, it's distinct ID. In Customer.io, it's customer ID. So the way that works is pre-built in the mappings. We'll go back into Mixpanel here and look at a track call. And you'll see this distinct ID specified by you. And what we've done here, and this is kind of a cool thing, we have a function called coalesce. And what this does is it says, hey, if there is a user ID populated from the source, then use that. And we're going to map that to distinct ID. If there isn't, fall back to the anonymous ID. Sometimes you are passing in calls that don't have the user ID. Then that still gets the data over to Mixpanel. So that's an example of how the mapping works. If we were to look, for example, at our journeys here, and we'll find the track action, you can see that user ID here maps to something different. So the CDP's defaults will automatically take care of that mapping. If you don't want to send user ID for some reason, you want to pick something else, that's fine. As long as you're sending it in, you can pick what maps to what, but that's how that mapping works.
Okay, so this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about improving kind of data confidence accuracy so that you can make better decisions. So we kind of started here with how you get Customer.io data pipeline set up. You've got all this data buzzing between your sources and your destinations. Everything's integrated. I think, again, any developer in the crowd probably knows when your marketing team comes to you and says, we just need your time for this one quick setup, and then we'll be out of your hair. Setting up a new tool never ends with just that quick first piece, usually. There's usually maintenance, adding new tools, getting the historical data in, making some of those updates. So I want to dig in a little bit there, Brendan. How does CDP make it easier for teams to test out new tools and then reduce the overall effort from a team that's needed to, if you're going to switch to a new tool, make that switch?
Yeah, I think this will probably hit on some of the past data stuff. So just sticking with the theme of Mixpanel, since analytics are one of the most popular destinations we see, let's say that you wanted to switch from Mixpanel to Amplitude, or at least you were just kind of curious to check that out. And those two products solve very similar problems. And let's say that you had been using Mixpanel for 2 years, like 2 years worth of data that had been coming through into Mixpanel. Let's also say that all of that data was coming through one or more CDP sources for that time. This is kind of what it would look like. So, all right, we want to play with Amplitude. Okay, so we'll set up an Amplitude destination. I'm going to connect it to all the same sources that Mixpanel is connected to. Put in the authentication info and enable it. Okay, now we see amplitudes up here. At this point, I'm kind of done. Like if I want to go play around with amplitude, amplitude will start receiving any future data from this point on from any of the sources, and it will receive that same data that Mixpanel is sending. So if I want to really compare the products, that's zero engineering time. I've just plugged in amplitude, and the default actions will automatically map the data appropriately. Now, let's say I've played with amplitude for a while and I'm just loving it. And okay, it's better than Mixpanel. I want to get off Mixpanel and I want to move fully to amplitude. At that point, you just need to delete this Mixpanel or disable this Mixpanel destination. But what about all that historical data? And that's where a feature called resend past data, which does exactly what it sounds like. And it's available on our premium CDP tiers. And what you would do is you send in a ticket up here and say, hey, I want to replay all of the data from all sources over to this new amplitude destination. And then we would do that. We'd push all of that data through at no extra cost. And then amplitude would have all of your backdated data and all the stuff going forward. Amplitude does support, not all destinations do, but amplitude does support backdating calls. So that's why that would work. And you can do that from a customer IO perspective on any destination, but that destination's API needs to support backdating data. So that's kind of one core example of like playing with a new tool. I also want to call out, because I think it's a core part of our strategy on CDP. What if you wanted to do something like migrate CDPs? You like, I don't want to stay locked into my CDP. I want to have choice. Well, from the beginning of our CDP journey, we knew we did not want to reinvent the wheel. And maybe some of you are familiar with like when Apple releases a new power plug or like headphone port or something, and it can be kind of frustrating. It limits customer choice, and that's not what we want. So we were not wanting to do that. Given how established Segment has been in the space and how many of our customers have enjoyed working with them, we are using their same API and scripting schema. So that means it's actually very easy to switch from Segment over to Customer IO, and then also from Customer IO over to Segment. Again, our goal is not vendor lock-in, not for destinations, also not for CDP. We want to be the best product out there for the problems that you need solved. And I'll just show you, since it's so quick, how fast this can be. If I go back to this site, I've got a different page over here that's set up on Segment. I got Segment pulled up. Let's take a look. Thinking about it. Okay. Ooh. All right. So you can see that that page view, and there's a few other things that I've set up on that page, like track and group, and a couple other things that are coming through. And I'm just going to do a quick check over here on the snippet, because I'm not sure I saw that new data coming through. Sorry for the loading times. Oh, okay. All right, well, I'm trying to just copy the JavaScript snippet over from Segment, make sure that I got that piece in there. But maybe while I'm waiting for that, I'll go over here and show what I'm talking about. So this is an example of the Segment snippet being installed, and then I just put a few simple calls in here, like a track call and a group call, just to show some of the key. If I wanted to switch from Segment to Customer IO, I don't need to change any of my track or group calls or anything that's already established in that space because the schema at Customer IO is the same. All I have to do is repaste this top part. So I'm just going to go and do that. Okay, so I just delete all of this and paste that in and save it. And then I'll go back over here and refresh. And now I'll see the calls coming in from that page, so that group call and the track call. I didn't have to change that other code to get that to work. And if I wanted to move back to segment, let's see, this came up. I would just copy that snippet and do the reverse. Delete this one, put ours in, save that, refresh it, and then as long as the page loads, you should see it come through here. There we go. Yeah. So just an example again about how we wanted it to be straightforward to migrate both between different tools, and even if you want to different CDPs, this is really a no vendor lock-in play.
Yeah, thinking of moments where I wanted to test a tool, but was just afraid of like, it's going to be so much lift on our team to even do that test. And so let's not even explore. I think I'm really excited about this because beyond just the point where you're choosing to adopt a new tool, those middle points where you're like, I just want to test it out first. But I don't want to have to pull my engineering team off their product build, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of speed there. Brendan, a really quick question here before we get to the next topic. Folks in the audience have been calling out other CDPs like RudderStack, FreshPaint. What's kind of the quick rundown on a migration from one of those, or even just testing it out?
Yeah, I mean, from RudderStack, RudderStack took a similar approach to us at trying to expand the ecosystem. So their API and schema is based on Segment as well. They do require you to say rudder analytics stat instead of just analytics stat. So there is a small bit of code editing that would be necessary if you wanted to come over, but not much. It's just renaming a few things, and the rest we can handle by default. FreshPaint has, I'm not as familiar with their schema. I don't think it's the same, but I can follow up on that piece. There'd be a reintegration almost necessary, or almost definitely, to come over from FreshPaint.
Awesome. Great questions, folks. Keep them coming. I'm going to keep us moving, and then so that we can have time for Q&A at the end to get to all these. But the other thing that Brendan is kind of thinking about is the ETL process. Sometimes folks have a different tool that they bring in to do ETL or reverse ETL. But talk to me about how CDP handles both of those processes.
Yeah, so this goes back to the story from the beginning where we had built out a lot of this capability directly into journeys. We're in the process of moving it from journeys over to data pipelines just for a simpler user experience, but I can show you all how it works today. So in journeys, I've got a reverse ETL sync set up right here. This is just a simple MySQL test database. And if I click on it, I can see it's been syncing 100 people. I set it to run every minute, which is a little extreme since none of this data changes, but just to show that kind of log here. I can see the query that's being run on that database. I can edit that query here. I can test, like I can run it and see what the results would be, and the data that's kind of coming through if I ever wanted to change that. And then on settings, I can schedule how frequently to do it, or if I wanted to schedule a start time and some identity resolution stuff here. Maybe you want to automatically move those people into a segment in journeys. You can do that too. Add multiple databases if you want, multiple MySQL databases. So this is how that works. We support Postgres, data warehouses, BigQuery, like Snowflake, a lot of different reverse ETL cases. If you're wanting to push data out into a data warehouse, I have a S3 bucket set up as an example, but you can, from S3, you can pull things into Redshift. We also support Google Cloud buckets. We also support Azure blob storage. So we can push data to multiple different places, and then from there it can be easily ingested into a warehouse. Here's the data that we send today. All the like messages that you might send out, we call them deliveries. All the content of those messages, if you're curious. Any of these, of course, you can turn off if you for compliance reasons. How folks are interacting with them. This is the automation logs, if you want to see how people are flowing through your automations, and then the attributes and the people. And all that stuff goes out to wherever you're exporting it as Parquet files. So here's the bucket that this is syncing to. You can see there's a lot of attribute data. If I go to the end here, there's going to be some metrics and other things, people data, all this stuff coming through. So again, these things are going to be, this user experience will be ported over to CDP, but it's available to play with today. You can already use it in Journeys.
Wonderful. I want to get us pretty quick here to talking about how customer data pipelines interacts with Journeys, the product that a lot of folks have probably known us by for the last 10 years. But really quick before we do, Brendan, let's touch on troubleshooting. So if a developer needs to come in or someone needs to come in and troubleshoot some of what's happening here, how does CDP kind of service that and make it intuitive?
Yeah, so we've taken an approach of trying to document all the stuff that you might want to wish you had in the past to quickly kind of troubleshoot what may or may not be going wrong. So as an example, this is the Journeys workspace here. This is a very simple example. We have this delivery errors thing at the bottom, and any sort of failure to be delivered to the destination will show up here. And this one is a really simple case, just saying, hey, there's no matching action. Action are those mappings that I was showing earlier. So for whatever the source data was, there was nothing matching it. Now, maybe I want to troubleshoot why that is. I think, well, everything should match an action. Well, I can click on the data that was coming in, and it will show me the full raw message that was received at the source and passed on. And I can copy it if I want and go over to the tester and just paste it in and reproduce that same error. And then from here, I could troubleshoot between actions if there's something, something going wrong, to make sure that I either update the action or figure out what was missing in the payload that did not trigger. So that's one example. I want to show one other one from Full Story. This is the same errors before. There are always for destinations going to be some errors that we can't categorize, just because we support all these different places, and they're going to all have their own unique error codes. So with data pipelines, we handle those as well. And what you see is not only the exact data that was sent into CDP that we transformed, but also the data that we sent out to them. This is that full post. Here's the URL we sent. We don't put the authorization in just for privacy, all the rest of the stuff in here. And then we capture the full response that we get from that API. So in this case, it's a small response. It just says not found because this neither the ID nor email matched a full story user, and full story requires that. But if it was a longer error, we would capture that as well. And this can prevent you from having to do a lot of extra testing to figure out, okay, what do I need to Google to figure out exactly what was going on here. So we try and record as much as possible. You can cycle through different errors and find all that information here.
Amazing. All right, we have a few more minutes before we get to Q&A. I'm going to jump us over to the next part, which is, like we said, how does customer data pipelines interact with our Journeys product? So many of you have probably known Journeys. It's our omnichannel messaging platform, allows you to build these wonderful automations that go out on channels like email, SMS, push, in-app messages, triggering all kinds of other automations and other tools using webhooks. So the question here, Brendan, is what does CDP add to this equation, and kind of what is the benefit of using CDP and Journeys in tandem when you're kind of looking to build out this personalized experience for your customers?
Yeah, so one of the biggest benefits is the identity resolution and this like 360-degree view of the customer that some of you may have heard about. It's very common in CDP marketing materials. Journeys gives you that. When you use data pipelines with Journeys, then you can build out this this view, and I can show an example there. Let me first make sure to connect this destination to this JavaScript source we've been using. Okay, that's done. And now let me click over to the journeys counterpart within this workspace here. And let's take a look at, I actually have a pre-set up profile here. Okay, loves at lotsofcars.com. I didn't get so creative with the name. So if I go over to the activity log here, I can see a few interesting things. First off, I can see that the data that flowed through Customer.io data pipelines directly, and it started with a page view. And then I can also see that an identify call came through, and that's what actually triggered this person to be created. And it set some attributes on the person, including an anonymous ID, and all this stuff happens automatically. And what's cool here, one of the things that's cool here in terms of identity resolution is we know that we've been tracking the anonymous page views and events from this person based on their anonymous ID. So once you actually make an identify call with that anonymous ID, and this is all like on the JavaScript snippet, it all comes standard. You don't have to, you just make a normal vanilla identify call, and we handle passing in the anonymous ID data and tracking that. Then we will actually perform an anonymous data merge. And we'll say these 3 page views, for example, if you look at the timestamp over here, they happened before this stuff. So we automatically merge them onto the profile at the right time. And now say you wanted to build out a segment for like everyone who performed a page view in the last day at least 3 times. Now this actually will be more accurate because we've been able to properly stitch together the data before we knew who the person was with the data afterward. So that's a quick example on identity resolution. There are a few others that just would take a little bit more time to demo. But why don't we talk about taking all this data from data pipelines and actually translating that into some action, so some actual messaging here. So let's pretend like instead of a nice video site, we are a car dealership for a minute, and let's take a look at actually I'll use the people that are in this segment already. Okay, so I can go back to this profile here and take a look at some of the data that we have stored on them. One of the attributes is stored in what's called JSON. And for anyone who's not familiar, this is a kind of a clever way to store lots of different data points on one thing in the same place. So for example, say you own a car. Well, there are lots of things about your car that might be interesting. For example, it takes gasoline, not like diesel. It was made by Kia. It's a passenger car, medium size, the model. All of these things apply to a car. And it's nice when you can sometimes put them in one place like this. And if JSON looks a little bit too codey for you, certainly understand this is something our support team loves to help with. So even within Customer.io journeys, if you want to play around with stuff like this, we got a lot of support for you there. So let's say that I want to, as this car dealership, send a promotion just to folks that have passenger cars. I don't care if they're medium or large or whatever. I just want them to be passenger cars. And I know that this car JSON attribute has that data in there for me. So if I go over to that segment we were looking at before and look at the filter conditions, I have this set up to look at car JSON, and I know it has a property called type, and I just want those that contain passenger. That's how I get it to include, we don't care if it's again medium or heavy or whatever. And I also want to make sure that whoever this person is has been active on our site before I give them a promotion. So that's why I've got this in here. And with the anonymous data, I've got this properly targeted. So I see there are 3 people in there. Now let's go and create a quick campaign. We'll call this the promotion for passenger vehicles campaign. And I want it to happen when someone moves in or out of a segment. And that segment is going to be the one we were looking at, active people with passenger cars. Okay. We'll move on to the next. I only want to send to subscribe people because this is a marketing promotion, not a transactional message. And I'm going to skip the goal setting for the demo. And now in my workflow, let's just say I want to send a straightforward email. Just drop the email in here. I'll look through the templates, and it looks like I've got a couple interesting ones here. I'll just pick this. Okay. So now I'm in the drag and drop builder, and I can see there's some information in here. We're using Liquid to personalize this, taking their first name, making sure that it's capitalized correctly, and we're offering people, hey, you get some trade-in value on these passenger cars. If I look at a preview, I can see different previews for the various folks in the segment, but this person's name is Bambi. Your Kia Sienna two-wheel drive is eligible for up to 10K towards a new vehicle. Book a appointment. So this is just a quick example of how you could take that data from the CDP and actually put it into action. So if I save this email here, and let's just say this is it. This is just a very simple email that I want to send. I'll leave it on draft, actually. I'll say I want to send it to all the people that match today. Click Start Campaign, and we are done. If we look in the drafts, it will queue up emails to each of these 3 people. I said to draft them just in case I want to make sure they look okay. Maybe I'll click on this one. I forgot to put a subject in, so probably I want to go back and add that subject before I send it. But I can see at least put personalization in here if I want to. And yeah, I could click Fix Email and go in and fix it if I want to, but for the demo purposes, I will stop there.
Yeah, and Brendan, as a marketer myself, I love the identity resolution piece just because otherwise you're starting from scratch with this new person. You don't know much about them. You're sending them a first email hoping to learn. But with this, we already knew the pages they'd clicked on before. So I'm even thinking of if you saw somebody was really into Toyotas on your website before that and you were capturing that, your first email that you hit them with could already have that context and already put a Toyota in front of them, knowing that there's probably a much higher chance they're going to take that next action. So yeah, love all the capabilities here. Okay, to round us out before we open up Q&A, for those in the audience who are thinking this all looks really cool, but the last thing I need is another expensive bill in my tech stack. So talk to me a little bit about why someone should choose Customer IO over other CDPs. And I know there's folks in the audience who've asked questions about this as we go. So hopefully this provides a little clarity there.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great question. So just like any product, Customer IO CDP is not for everyone, but I'll get into some of the reasons that I think it's the ways that I would make that decision. So the first one is what are you trying to do with the data that you're trying to consolidate? And if you're just trying to move it to some analytics tools, maybe some messaging tools, maybe a CRM, stuff like that, got fairly straightforward use cases. You just want to aggregate all sorts of different data and pass it through. A good question to ask is how many bells and whistles do you want on your data? And if the answer is like, I just want to be able to filter things, pass them through, have good compliance controls, Customer IO has you covered today, even with this early access version that we have out. So you can do it all. And from a cost perspective, like I was saying earlier, our strategy is not to nickel and dime folks on this. So compared to any other CDP out there, outside of maybe hosting your own like open source, if you want to go into that maintenance, it's going to be at least 20% cheaper, and again, sometimes up to 90% less expensive. So if cost is important to you, and that's been something we've been hearing from a lot of customers, particularly this year, you're not going to find a less expensive option to manage your data, and that's one reason to think about Customer IO. The other one is our vendor lock-in strategy, which I do think is kind of unique because it's not exactly self-serving. Yes, it's easy to switch from like a segment or router stack over, but it's just as easy to go somewhere else. We are doubling down on that commitment by also including like SendGrid, we have in here if you want to send that as a destination. Twilio, we've got in here, Cordial, Braze, like you can use the CDP with lots of different messaging automation tools. We don't lock you in here. So whether it's you want to use journeys or you want to experiment with other things, you can use our CDP to really enhance your choice through that support. So that's another just thing to take into account. The other one is, I touched on this earlier, but the scale and performance that exist on this platform, it's super hard to demo, but we've already thrown in stress tests more data than all of the data that we've thrown, all of our customers sent through journeys today, and the system just sailed straight through it. So it's so good that we're actually taking a lot of that architecture and backporting it into journeys. So yeah, I mean, the scale potential here is great. So you can get this amazing price without sacrificing scale and reliability. And then the last one I'll call out is sometimes not immediately obvious, but support. You can, like, our support team today often gets asked from our customers that are using third-party CDPs, like, hey, why isn't this data showing up? Is it formatted? What's the problem? And we're not really able to help with that now because we don't have access to those tools and they've got their own support teams. So it often turns into this bounce back and forth between the different teams if you're needing to troubleshoot something. And it's one of the benefits of having it all consolidated here is the support team is trained up on CDP, they're trained up on journeys, and they can help you with the end-to-end configuration and troubleshooting with no need to bounce between people. So those are a few things that pop up.
I'm going to jump right to a couple of questions that I know we went past earlier, but let's see. This first one, let's see, where are we? I'm looking at my tab. Oh, okay. So somebody asks, does your platform support Segment SDK? Brendan, what are thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which of Segment has a bunch of different SDKs. They got like some mobile SDKs. They got yeah, Go, Python, several others. Our SDKs like Node, Go, and Python are, yes, there are it's the same. We forked it, but it's the same exact, like if you're using one of those SDKs today, it's a drop-in replacement. And yeah, you can see the documentation here links to where we have this stuff stored. So we do have Segment SDKs in that sense. We are going to be adding some more over time. So if there's a specific one that you're curious on, let me know, but I think the general answer is yes.
Sophie also asked, do we still need to create events in the Customer Journeys product, or should we start sending events directly into CDP? That's a good question. How does that work?
Yeah, so there will be a couple options, but I would recommend sending stuff directly into CDP just because then it gives you some flexibility if you want to pass it elsewhere. So yes, there would be an integration lift changing from the direct Customer Journeys integration to one of these sources. The APIs are similar, but again, we're taking segment specs. So there are some things that your engineering team would have to do for that. We are working on, I hate to call it an auto integration because it's not going to be that simple, but something that will take the existing data that you're already passing into journeys and make that available by default as a source. Kind of like we have this messages source here, which is just for like metrics, like opened, clicked, stuff like that. So we're planning to add more to this that would allow you to still mostly stay integrated to journeys without having to do extra engineering work. Hoping to have that in the next month or two, but there might still be some data that you want to send through to the CDP that is not super easy to do through Customer IO's settings. So yeah, I would recommend reintegrating.
Got it. Annika asked a while back, is there something similar like Unify in Segment where you can build audiences and set custom traits? Brendan, where does that play out? Is that something that happens in Journeys, the audience building, or is it in the CDP?
Yeah, good question. So it is in Journeys. So the segments Unify is similar to our people, where the data gets unified into I wish I had prettier data here. A lot of this is test data without emails, but it gets unified in one place and all the attributes are stored there. And then Segment calls them audiences, but we call them segments. It's the same exact concept where you can build out specific criteria that you want to target. We even have tools like maybe you want to sync this to an ad audience to Facebook or Google. I've got one set up here for Facebook. Just come in and sync it, and then you can use this for like advertising retargeting. So yeah, this is where the audiences and Unify stuff lives.
Barbara asks, can I send info from Google Analytics to Customer IO? For example, I have a group of people who are filtered in Google Analytics. I want those people to be sent to a segment.
Yeah, I mean, if you can, we have a Google Analytics destination. It's a little confusing because it is really a source. There are a couple more that are, I think, coming out tomorrow. And yeah, so you can, if you want, integrate Google Analytics through the JavaScript snippet of CDP, just to avoid having to copy and paste like a bunch of different snippets on your site. You just have one, the CDP snippet. And then once you connect your Google Analytics destination to it, it'll automatically load and configure your Google Analytics anywhere that you've got the CDP JavaScript. So just saves a little bit of maintenance time. And then, yeah, I mean, any of the data that comes in through Google Analytics, you can pass to any sort of destination as you need.
From there. There's been a few different questions that I'm going to kind of consolidate into one, but I guess we touch on kind of like the overall process for how we're rolling out CDP, what's general access, and then we've had a bunch of other questions about sources and destinations. When will this destination be rolled out, et cetera, et cetera. So Brennan, give us kind of the high level overview. How is general access working, and then how are we moving in, or sorry, how is early access working? How are we moving into general access?
Yeah, we've been really, the only reason we did the early access is because we don't, Customer.io has over 200 employees, but there aren't, like, the whole company is not on this product yet. And I wanted to be able to take some time talking to some early access folks before we kind of open the floodgates. So there's not much on the feature front that we're adding other than porting the reverse ETL and ETL stuff over just for simpler UX. So early access is we're rolling that out over the next like 4 to 6 weeks, and it's just a slow roll. If you sign up through the webinar, you will have like prioritized access. I'll probably have it within the next few days. You can already play around and just use it as a regular product. We're planning to take it to general availability. I mean, at the moment, we're thinking sometime like end of June-ish is when we're planning to roll it out. I say ish because we want to, again, still get a lot of learnings from these early access folks and make sure that we get ahead of anything that we weren't thinking really matters to people before we do the full push.
Wonderful.
And in terms of, sorry, I should say for like new destinations and sources, we will be constantly adding that stuff over time. We also do have a catalog here, and if you want to like request one, you can either a source or a destination if there's something that you want. That stuff we're all aggregating, and we'll use that to guide our prioritization choices.
Yeah, definitely get in there. We'll have, if you're a customer, that follow-up email that's going to go into your inbox in 5 minutes, that'll have a link to sign up for early access again. So go ahead and you can click through, and we'll hopefully get you into the platform to start playing around. Brendan, we are at time, but thank you so much for your time. And I think I always come to these events wanting to ask the how and why and show me the money. So thank you so much for kind of pulling everything up, walking through, setting up some of that stuff live. I know that's always daunting on a live demo. So thanks for doing that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Folks in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, someone in our technical support team will reach out and hopefully follow up with you so we can make sure that you get what you need. And yeah, again, check your inbox for that email that's coming with some follow-up resources, and we look forward to having you in our CDP product. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.